What's on, ladies and gentlemen? My name's Ross, I like games, and today I have an absolute treat for you. You see, prior to this past weekend, there had been two Archon format Vault tours in the world. One in Europe in Eindhoven, won by Rachel Trimble with her captain deck, and one in Illinois, won by George and his Maximiliano deck, the Library Access and the Penth Seed deck. And those two lovely people thought, you know what? We should have a best of 3, or maybe even a best of 5, to determine which one of us is the better player with the better deck. And they're such lovely people, they hit me up and said, hey, Wossy, do you fancy casting it? Yes. Yes, I do. So, ladies and gentlemen, I present to you the winners of the first North American and the first European Vault tours. I know there was one in Seattle, but it was sealed, so it didn't really... It's not the same, because you didn't get to take your best deck. You were picking 1 out of 3, going against each other to determine who really is the best. I'm a little bit excited, and you should be too. So grab yourselves a nice cold beverage, settle in, and enjoy. All right, ladies and gentlemen, it does look like we are off. So we got George at the top, we've got Rachel at the bottom, captain of Barracks Launch against Maximiliano, Gasoline Dungeon Keeper. I'm going to be honest, Rachel's deck has a much easier name to do. So, we need to figure out who's going out first, and we need to figure out what their plans are. If we have a look at George's hand, and incidentally, on the Crucible, it's so much easier to see what the cards do. Looks like George has got... Oh, looks like George has actually gone and done a mulligan. Because he's got a whole different hand here. And Rachel's got, well, shadows and logos, including Time Traveler. So did you see a Hunting Witch go down, gives you an ember every time you drop a creature? He's only got one creature in his hand at the moment, just an Ancient Bear, so that's more of a long game kind of thing. As Rachel starts off, she's got a Quixo the Adventurer. It's alright, Scott Skirmish lets you draw a card, but here comes the Time Traveler. Gives you an Ember, lets you draw 2 cards. That's not too bad at all. And she's even dropped a Fogify, so there will be no fighting next turn from George. So, George, if you wanted to fight, sir, gutted. You can't do no fighting. So, couple of Ember on her first turn from Rachel. They're not too bad. One from the Fogify, one from the Time Traveler. Rachel's saying, I'll try to keep up with your actions. We'll do the best we can. Now, we know George has a combo deck. It's all about Library Access and a Penth Seed. Now, he has got a couple of creatures down, a Guardian Demon, a Dust Imp, and a Shaffles. I love Shaffles. At the end of your turn, your opponent loses an Ember. So it goes over to Rachel's turn, but because Shaffles was down, Rachel's down to 1 Ember. Now, she has got a decent Mars hand, it looks like there, and she does get to drop an Orbital Bombardment and takes out a lot of stuff. Now, she did take out the Dust Imp, which did give George a couple of Ember, which is slightly unideal, but he's still not forging next turn, and that's what's crucial. So we see a YXZelo Bolter come down, we see a Phylinx the Disintegrator come down, and a Squawker, which readied a Mars creature, which meant a little bit of reaping. So that's alright. 4 Ember, it's not too bad. It's alright. And all George has got left now is the Guardian Demon. Nice. Yeah, should have purged Shaffles. That was when he put Squawker, not Squawker, sorry. But she had a chance to potentially purge a creature. She didn't. And unfortunately, I mean, there are 2 Shaffles in George's deck. So if you see a couple of Shaffles, you're losing 2 Ember every turn. So both players here are right on the verge of being able to forge a key. Now remember, what George is looking for here is Library Access and a Penth Seed. If he can get that combo off, he's going to draw a ridiculous amount of cards. And he's got things like Twin Bolt Access. Oh, now he does play a 3 Fates there. Destroy the 3 most powerful creatures, which hurt Rachel a lot more than it hurt him. And he also plays a Dexter to capture an Ember. He also got a Library of Babel down to draw a card. What he wants is to get that Penth Seed down, wait until it's ready, at which point he can basically double library access, play library access, sacrifice Nepenthe Seed to reuse it, and then start going with things like Twin Bolt Mission to clear Rachel's board, control the weak to determine what Rachel's active house will be, etc., etc. That's the combo he's going for. And as it stands at the moment, that combo's not going off. It's going to be like a turn after Nepenthe Seed. Now, this is crucial. Rachel gets a Nexus down. Nexus is huge for this, because when you reap, you can use an opponent's artifact as if it were yours, and she gets both her Nexus down. There's 2 in her deck. If she uses Nepenthe Seed, it gets sacrificed, even though she's using it. So that is absolutely huge here. Ooh, she also puts down the Sting, which is quite nice. So even though George just forged his first key, that Ember went to Rachel, and if she's going for a Shadow's turn here, she can then essentially sacrifice this and forge a key. Because you cannot forge while the Sting is out, so she does need to get rid of it now. The Sting is a great card, but you've got to be ready to get rid of it at kind of a moment's notice. So we see double Ancient Bear coming down from George here. Love me some Ancient Bear. And a Big Twig as well. Although Big Twig's one of those, Big Twig rarely is useful because you've got to stun a creature before you can fight it, and when you reap, you stun it. It's a little bit awkward. Now, it looks like George actually ends his turn with 0 Ember there. So Rachel does fairly predictably get rid of the Sting. You can't have 12 Ember and not have your Forge a Key step. And now we see Nexus coming in, does a bit of reaping, and gets to use Library of Babel. Not bad. It's fine. It's alright. Now, here, what she's got a couple of Silvertooth, remember they come into play ready. What Rachel's really doing here is just building up a huge amount of Ember. She is just building up Ember so that she can essentially go and forge a few keys in a row. Rachel doesn't have this ridiculous combo like George does, but what she does have is just decent draw power, decent Ember generation, and a bunch of tricks going on. So there's just a little bit of reaping going on. She's got a Dusk Runner down there. Let's see if we can get that up on there. And then a little bit of forging, and she's there at 16 Ember. She's 2 away from being able to just forge 3 keys in a row and potentially win the game. Now, one of the things that's very interesting about George's deck, it's not a Shadows deck. Generally, when your opponent's got 16 Ember, they're just making sure that Library of Babel wasn't used twice, because although Nexus does let you use an artifact as if it were your own, you can't use Library of Babel twice, because when you use it, it gets exhausted. Which is funny, because then your opponent can't use it, because it's exhausted going into their turn. These things get unexhausted at the end of the turn. So George isn't playing Shadows. He does not have great options for stealing Ember. So what Rachel's basically doing here is just rushing. That's her plan. She's just going to rush. And she forges a key. But remember, she's 2 Ember away from being able to essentially forge the next 2. So she's gone for a Logo's turn. And now what is quite upsetting, she has lost one of her Nexus. And George has his Nepenthe Seed down. So this is what's going to be absolutely crucial here. She needs to keep her Nexus on the field. And the problem is that now she used her Nexus, because at the moment that Nepenthe Seed is out, and when it goes over to George's turn, now it depends on whether he's got library access in hand, because the other thing is, remember, you can only get the combo off when you've got the cards. It's not like George can go, I've got Nepenthe Seed down, library access. You've got to have library access down. So she drops Twin Bolt Mission there, does a bunch of damage to Ancient Bear and to Big Twig there. Twin Bolt Mission's a decent little card. It's one of the ones that George relies on when he gets his combo rolling, just to chuck some damage down on the board. The thing to remember here is that Rachel's now forged a key and has 16 Ember, whereas George is now not forging a key. And he's not playing Shadows. And it's really a trade-off for George here. On the one hand, he's got this ridiculous library access Nepenthe Seed combo, and all these disruptive cards like Twin Bolt Mission, Control the Weak, etc., that he can use to try and take advantage of it. But on the other hand, if he's against an opponent like Rachel that jumps ahead, that's a bit of an issue. If the combo gets going, then he's going to be in a decent position in terms of, he's not got great stealing options, but, he's got some, and that's all he really needs. But the thing to remember here, he's not got library access in hand. And that's a bit of an issue. Now, he has gone logos, so maybe he can use his Library of Babel to draw one? Maybe? As it stands at the moment, he doesn't have the library access. And the thing is, even if you get the library access, you still need... Now, Skippy Time Hog's important here. Your opponent cannot use any cards next turn. That's important, because it means that Rachel cannot use Nexus to get rid of Nepenthe, which, of course, is her number one goal. George's deck is fine, but when he gets the combo off, it's phenomenal. So the key for Rachel here is to stop the combo going off. The key for George is to get the combo going off. That is one of the big things about this game. Now, he doesn't draw the library access. He does draw Dexter, he does draw Dimension Door, he does draw Fogify. He drew 3 Logos cards, but not the right Logos cards. Now, he does have a Restring Guntus. So what he can essentially do, now that he's used Skippy Time Hog to stop Rachel using Nexus this turn, he can use Restring Guntus or Control the Weak to stop her using Nexus next turn. Here's the thing, though. She's just forged a key and she's got 11 Ember. So... yeah, and George there saying you got it, because it doesn't matter at this stage. Even though the game is generally about George not getting the combo off or George getting the combo off, the thing is Rachel's got so much Ember so quickly that it doesn't matter. George needed a combo a turn or two ago and he didn't get it, and now not only does he need to stop Rachel using Nexus, he also needs to stop her forging a key. He can't do both of those. And George just saying that the sting was too much. Because it was the sting that, of course, gave her the ridiculous pool of Ember. It took away the 6... well, it didn't take away, but it was when George used his, 6 Ember to forge a key, they actually went to Rachel instead. And that was just a little bit too much, unfortunately. Hey-ho. So, good game from both the players there. Rachel just showing, quite simply... oh, Rachel was going to key abduction for the win. Oh. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we're into game 2. Now, George did want me to point out, he did start the game last turn with library access in hand. The problem with starting with library access is, if you're not ready to play it, you're basically playing of a chain the whole game. You've got one card in hand you're just not going to play, and that can be really awkward. So that's why he mulliganed despite having library access in hand. So Rachel goes first for Quixo the Adventurer. With Skirmish and drawing a card when you survive a fight, which you will do, given that you got Skirmish, that draws a lot pretty quickly. Now, we see Hunting Witch come down, and then Dust Pixie gets 3 Ember, and there's a Ritual of Balance. It's not the best stealing card ever, but it's not bad. And then with Ancient Bear coming down, that's 4 Ember in one turn, while getting 3 creatures and an artifact on the board. It's not a bad start, ladies and gentlemen. It's not a bad start at all. Now, we do see here, we're just fighting Hunting Witch, taking Hunting Witch down, drawing a card, and help from Future Self. Gains you an Ember, searches a Time Traveller, and now she's going to be able to play the Time Traveller, get another Ember, draw 2 cards. And you can see here, you're supposed to have a 6-card hand. That's an 8-card hand after having played 3 cards. That's pretty crucial, ladies and gentlemen. So Wild Wormhole comes down, lets her play a Squawker. In fact, why don't we leave the discard piles up? We can't always do that if there's too many creatures out, but we can leave a discard up for a moment for game 2. Let me know in the comment section if you think this is a better way to do it. And we saw a second Wild Wormhole there as well. So, yeah. There is a lot coming down, ladies and gentlemen. And that's how Blipip ends up on the field, despite it being a Logos turn. So, finishing... oh my goodness, ladies and gentlemen. 3 Fates comes down. And given that George is sitting there with a 1-power creature, that gives him an Ember and takes out all 3 of Rachel's creatures. Quixo, Blipip and Time Traveller, they're 2-power creatures. They both go down to 3 Fates. Oh, and a Restring Guntus. Now, does it say... Okay, so Restring Guntus, you can see, and this is what I love about the Crucible, because we can see there will be no shadows from Rachel here. Ooh, which is kind of harsh, because she's literally got 6 shadows cards in hand. Ooh. That's huge. Because Rachel's choices are basically discard her entire hand or not do anything. Restring Guntus stops her choosing shadows and she has nothing on the board. And it was a combination of 3 fates which really did it there. That's huge. So he does play a hand of Dis there, I think. Yeah. I mean, this is a really awkward situation. Plus, we see a Shaffles coming down here. The end of the turn, your opponent loses an Ember. This is a good position. Yeah, Wossy can see the hand, guys. Wossy has already pointed out. You have now that's the thing. Now, I made a mistake a moment ago. I apologize. I made a silly. Rachel can't discard her Shadows cards. Because remember, during your turn, you can basically... Oh, this might be it. Because you're only allowed to discard cards of your active house, and Rachel can't do anything at all. That is absolutely ridiculous, ladies and gentlemen. That is absolutely ridiculous. It looks like we're going to game 3. So we are now going into game 3, and here's what's weird, right? George has a combo deck. The whole point of the whole discussion about George's deck was that he's got this library access and a Pentseed combo. Well, game 1, Rachel was just like, I'm just going to rush Ember before you can get set up because you don't have those stealing cards a lot of decks have. And in game 2, George was like, I'm going to drop a Restring Guntus to stop you using shadows. When you've only got shadows cards in hand, and that literally won the game, because remember, just to reiterate one more time, you can play, use, or discard cards of the active house during your turn. But the fact of the matter is, when your active house is not shadows, yeah. That's just... It wasn't nothing she could do. She was literally locked out of the game. Because remember, it wasn't just dropping Restring Guntus, it was dropping 3 fates. If Rachel had some creatures on the board, Restring Guntus is a 1-power creature without any elusive. Restring Guntus is really easy to take down. It kind of has to be, given what it does. Yeah, that was a pretty good play from George there. Now, he starts off with a very Dis-heavy hand, it looks like George does. He's got 4 Dis creatures, so that might be something to think about. Rachel, on the other hand, she's got Nexus and a couple of Silvertooth. But then she's also got Help from Future South, Fogify, another Help from Future South, and a Wild Wormhole. Yeah, I feel quite confident Rachel's going Logos turn 1. Because it stops your opponent now if she's going first, which she should be. Oh, she totally should have gone Fogify. Now, she can't see George's hand like I can. But going for Fogify here would stop George playing all of those 4 Dis creatures in his hand, which would have been pretty gosh darn good. Now, as it turns out, he just plays 3 fates to get rid of the Silvertooth. So Rachel does still have her Ember. Again, I can see their hands and Rachel can't. But Fogify would have been a great turn 1 play there. But then again, you often don't want to use a Logos card on its own when you know you're going to go Logos the following turn. And Rachel's got a good Logos turn coming up. So double Help from Future South gets double Time Traveler. Double Time and 2 Ember. Double Time Traveler gets another 2 Ember. Plus drawing 2 cards. For each of them, that's 4 in total. Plus, she's got the Wild Wormhole that lets her play the top card of her deck. The Fogify that stops George playing creatures. Effervescent Principle, which she is definitely not going to play. And it doesn't give an Ember bonus, so probably fair to assume she's just going to discard that from her hand. At the moment, it's clogging up her hand. She doesn't need it, and she's got 8 Ember. She doesn't want to play it. Maybe next turn, but I doubt it, ladies and gentlemen. Now, having said all of that, what she's actually ended up with is a couple of creatures, including Taliga. Now, that's a creature I like very much indeed, because every time your opponent plays a creature, you gain an Ember. It's the anti-hunting witch. Now, having said that, George has Nepenthe Seed on board, and Rachel doesn't have Nexus on board. She's got Nexus in hand, but she doesn't have Nexus on board. Now, I was being silly. Sorry, George had Taliga out. I do apologise. It's hard because all the cards are facing the same way. So George has Taliga out, but Taliga has now gone. You have to get rid of Taliga because you're gaining too much Ember that way. Now, Rachel has forged her first key, which is quite nice. And she's got Mars, and she's got a Phylix Disintegrator down. And that means you can make your opponent lose a bunch of Ember. She's got a Grabber Jammer down to make your opponent's keys cost one more. Now, here's a fun one. George drops his Skippy Time Hog. Your opponent cannot use any cards next turn. You can still play them, but you can't use them, which is going to stop Rachel using Phylix the Disintegrator, which she could then use to get rid of his Ember, bring it down below 7. So she gets a Noddy the Thief down, and she gets Dusk Runner down. I believe I said earlier that she had a Nexus in hand. I was lying, it's Noddy the Thief. They both look quite similar from far away. But she's not able to stop George forging. The good news is, because of Grabber Jammer, George had to pay all 7 to forge. He couldn't do it for 6. But that's not going to help all that much. Because unfortunately, he still forged a key. Now, it's 1 key each, and Rachel ain't forging next turn. So now for George, it's down to a very simple, can I draw library access and get the combo rolling before my opponent is able to get rid of my Nepenthe Seed? Now, as it happens, Rachel doesn't have Nexus on the board. She doesn't have Nexus in hand. Now here we get Restringuntus coming down. Now the question is, what house is being locked out of here? Looks like that decision's being made. Remember, Hunting Witch is still on the board. So every time George plays a creature here, he's getting an Ember, which is pretty gosh darn nice. That's going to help him out quite favourably. And he stopped Shadows. You would think it would be Shadows with George's crazy combo. Now, we saw in game 1, Rachel can rush, and her deck is able to do that. But the biggest problem for George is Rachel's combination of bait and switch to steal Ember and Nexus to get rid of Nepenthe Seed, etc. That's what George is worried about. So it really is Shadows he wants to stop. The thing is, as I said, Restringuntus is a 1-power creature. So Rachel can actually get rid of it with anything. Shouldn't use Phylix, to be honest, because that would then go down as well. As it turns out, she plays Twin Bolt Emission and gets rid of it without using one of her creatures. Interestingly enough, she's already gone through her entire deck and had to reshuffle, discard into the deck. She then plays Time Traveler, gets an Ember, draws a couple of cards. Now, George still doesn't have the library access. Ooh, here's a fun one. She plays a Titan mechanic. Now, when it's on a flank, each key costs -1 to forge. That is yours and your opponent's, but she wasn't able to get to 5 Ember. If she was, then she'd be able to forge next turn, but unfortunately not. Now, because of... Nope, Grabber Jammer's gone. Ignore that thought. So George could forge for 5, but he's only got 3, so it's kind of irrelevant at the moment. But that does make it very interesting. Of course, remember, Rachel's always got the option of just dropping a creature next to Titan Mechanic, meaning it's no longer on a flank and the ability will then be turned off. But as it stands at the moment, we're kind of in that weird mid-game. Oh, down comes Restringuntus. Now it's fighting Phylix. This is nice. He's just getting his Ember going. Now, he's got 5, but because of Titan Mechanic, he will be able to go. And he actually plays Control the Weak to force Rachel to use Logos as her active house on the next turn. I thought the Restringuntus had been taken away, but the Restringuntus is there now, unfortunately, for Rachel, which is not good for her. That is not what she's looking for. So, what can Rachel do? Now, the bad news is she's actually got no Logos cards in hand at all. So she uses Titan Mechanic to fight Resta and Guntis, take it out, which is nice, because now she's opening Shadows back up again. And she can use Time Traveler to just reap. But now George forges his second key. And I'm still very confused by the fact. Oh, hang on a second. Look at George's hand. He's got Dimension Door. He's got Lab Work. He's got Library Access. Looks like he might get the combo next turn, and I don't know if Rachel can stop him. It looks... Could this be it? Could this be the turn where the combo fires off? It might be, ladies and gentlemen. This might be the turn. In which case, bad news bears. Ha! Bad news ancient bears. Now, the answer is no. Because he's gone in for Untamed. And I see where he's going with this. He wants his hand to be as ready as possible for when the turn comes around. And the fact of the matter is, Rachel's going to have to wait a turn for Nexus to actually come online, because it plays down exhausted. So as it stands at the moment, there's no huge rush for George. Now, Rachel has gone and forged her second key, again for 5, because Titan Mechanic is still on a flank. But it's in this weird kind of thing where it doesn't really matter what she does if George gets the combo. Now the other option here is just go for it. Now, you see she plays an Urchin to steal an Ember, and she uses Silvertooth and Noddy the Thief. Now, remember, Noddy the Thief can steal an Ember. You use that instead of Reaping. Silvertooth is just plain Reaping. And one of the things that Rachel's going to try and do here is just get enough Ember so that next turn she can forge a key and go. That's going to be fairly crucial. Now, here we go, ladies and gentlemen. Library Access has been played. Nepenthe Seed has been used. Rachel's less than happy. We've now got double Library Access on the board. So now every card that George plays will net him 2 cards. Now he gets to play Fogify. Stops Rachel fighting next turn. Draws him a couple of cards. Gets him an Ember. And honestly, and here we go. Twin Bolt Emission. Just to start taking creatures out and get an Ember. Now, the thing is, Rachel has an Effervescent Principle and a Bait and Switch, either of which can kind of take away half of George's Ember. But if George can get up to like 14 Ember, or even 12 maybe, it's not really going to matter, to be honest with you. It's not really going to be an issue. So we see here, and you can see George is using Lab Work to archive a card. He's using Dimension Door to get Ember, to steal Ember from his opponent. It's a really good stealing card, incidentally. And he's just going to keep going here. He's going to keep playing his cards. He's going to keep drawing cards. And by the end of the turn, and it's, you know, any Ember you would gain from Reaping is stolen from your opponent instead. Now, we can do that with Quixer the Adventurer to take one. But the fact of the matter is, he's still got a Phase Shift he can play to use one of his other cards. And looks like he's got the Library Access there as well. And he's just gonna keep going. And basically draw his entire hand. And at this stage, yeah, there goes a... And now I believe that's a 3rd Library Access? Yeah. I think that's now 3 cards every time he does anything. And that's just, you know, he's only got 8 cards in his discard pile and 1 in his deck. So, okay, now he's got a deck of 6. And now he's using Control of the Weak to force Rachel to go Shadows next turn. I believe it's Effervescent Principle he's primarily worried about. Because obviously Bait and Switch basically evens up the Ember. So with Bait and Switch, with Rachel having 3 Ember, George can go to 9. And then they would even out at 6. So now Bait and Switch would leave George at 6 Ember, whereas Effervescent Principle would leave him at 5. I don't think it's really going to matter at this stage. You can see now George has his entire hand. Sorry, his entire deck in his hand. He has 1 card in his discard. That is literally it. Now he has none. Now he has his entire deck in his hand or on the board. He's got 11 Ember. Rachel has 3. Now, Rachel's still going to have a turn. Incidentally, it's going to be a Shadow's turn. And she does have bait and switch in hand. But that's all she's got. Now, she's lost all her creatures, obviously. There is an argument for George to leave Titan Mechanic on the field, just to let him forge for 1 fewer. Now, he also gets a Shaffles on the board, so Rachel's going to lose an Ember at the end of her turn, which ironically will mean she... The fewer Ember Rachel's got, the better bait and switch will be. But George knows that. He's up to 12 Ember now, playing a Twin Bolter mission. Incidentally, I know Titan Mechanic would reduce forging a key down to 5, but the fact of the matter is, the Ember you got from it essentially just offset that, and also took away some of Rachel's options, like forging for 5 or reaping with it. So, now George is just in that stage where it's how much is enough. At what point does George decide, you know what, I've got this? He's already forged 2 keys. So all he needs to do is pass over to Rachel. Remember, all she's got in hand is a bait and switch for Shadows, and that's going to be her house next turn. I mean, Skippy Timehog comes down, but it's kind of irrelevant. And now, it's just, at what point does George go, yeah, I got enough. I've got enough Ember. Now, he's up to 17, incidentally. At what point does George decide, I've got enough at 18, there's nothing Rachel can do. I'm cool. 19. At this stage, it's just kind of watching the number tick up. 20. And I think 21. We're already at that stage where I think Rachel's lost. Rachel's not forging a key at the beginning of her next turn. She's got 21. She's got 3 Ember. That's half as much as she needs. George has got 21 Ember, so regardless, 22 Ember, so regardless of what Rachel does, I don't think it's possible for her to stop George winning the game next turn. I think George has guaranteed the win. He's cleared Rachel's board of creatures, he's dropped to control the weak to force her into using the house he wants her to use, and he's got 22 Ember. And Rachel just says, good game, and ladies and gentlemen, that is it. That is our best of 3. And it turns out that George's Library Access Nepenthe deck is the best Keyforge deck we've seen so far. Remember, doesn't mean it's the best Keyforge deck. But as far as I'm concerned, we've had 1 Archon format Vault Tour in North America. George won it. We've had 1 Archon format Vault Tour in Europe. Rachel won it. And I know there was a sealed one in Seattle, but it's sealed, so it doesn't really count because it's not take your best deck, it's see what deck you draw. So the fact of the matter is, this is now the best Keyforge deck. It might not be forever. Maybe there are several amazing decks we've never seen, but it doesn't matter. As far as I'm concerned, ladies and gentlemen, George has proven he is the best Keyforge player, or he's got the best Keyforge deck. That's up to you, ladies and gentlemen. That's up to you. But the fact of the matter is, it took down a Vault Tour, and now it's taken down the winner of the other Vault Tour. These have been fun games. We saw in Game 1, Rachel just rushed and won. We saw in Game 2 that George dropped a perfectly timed and perfectly guessed Restringuntus after a free Fates to completely lock Rachel out of the game. And then, of course, we saw in Game 3, the combo went. The combo went off. Now, hang on a second, ladies and gentlemen. As I'm sitting here wrapping up, it looks a lot like we're turning this into a best of 5. Nice. So, remember, ladies and gentlemen, we're into a best of 5 now. I'm just sitting here being like, yeah, let's do this. Best of 3, it's over. But no, we're still going. Of course, I'm recording my intro after this, so you'll know it was a best of 5 before we started. Taliga comes down from George, a great turn 1 creature, because each time your opponent plays a creature, you gain an Ember. That's pretty nice. As for Rachel, it's a fine turn 1. You got Quixo the Adventurer, Wild Wormhole, and Lab Work, and you can potentially use that to archive, I would imagine, Biomatrix backup, and then potentially try and set yourself up for a good Shadows turn the following turn. That's where I'd be going with this anyway. So Wild Wormhole comes down to get an Ember, lets you play YX Zelo Bolter, which was the card that Rachel wished in game 1 she had used to purge. I think it was Shaffle she wanted to purge in the end. So, I can't see the archive. Having said that, I'm fairly sure it is the Biomatrix backup because it's not in her hand anymore. That seemed like the sensible one to try and set yourself up for a really good Shadows turn next turn. Didn't really work. She only drew a Dusk Runner, but she tried, ladies and gentlemen. She tried. So now comes a Skippy Time Hog, means your opponent can't use any cards next turn, along with a Quixo the Adventurer and a Dexter. So one of those turns really there for George to just set up. Now, annoyingly, I can't see the card that George archived there, but I'm sure it will be fine. It wasn't the Pemp Seed. Was it library access? Wait a second. Nope. Doesn't tell me. Just says he archived a card. So here we are, ladies and gentlemen. Here we are. Rachel, what's she going for? Skippy is annoying. Because now what does she go? I mean, if you can't use any cards, I think probably I'm going Shadows here. Yeah, because Shadows, at least you got 3 cards in your hand you can play. Although annoyingly, remember that Silvertooth does come into play ready. See, the whole point of Silvertooth is you play it and then reap. And that's what always happens. And George calls it. Rachel says Skippy is annoying, and George is like, you got a Silvertooth, haven't you? Because, of course, you can play the Silvertooth, but you can't then reap with it. And Silvertooth's a 2-power creature without elusive. It's not staying on the field very long. General rule of Silvertooth is you play it, you reap, and then, hopefully that works out. Hopefully you're fine with that. But unfortunately, that's not what's happening here. Which is, let's say less than ideal. Yeah, that's a little bit sad. And I believe she is already chosen. Yeah, she's already chosen Shadows. So really here the turn is play a Silvertooth, but you can't reap. Play a Relentless Whispers, probably against Skippy Time Hog, just purely because that's the only one it will actually destroy. And then pop a Dusk Runner down. And to be honest, there isn't a great target for Dusk Runner, because Quixo you really want to fight, not reap. Oh, now she has picked up Biomatrix back up from her archives, so that might... Okay, so she has in fact changed to Mars. She hasn't played anything, so there's no big problem with doing that. So now she can use Orbital Bombardment, which will allow her to drop 4 damage around. Presumably you'd want to get rid of Taliga there, yeah. Because Taliga's getting an Ember every time you play a creature, and that's just really great Ember generation. You don't want to leave that on board for your opponent to be able to use. So that's kind of cool. Then she's got Squawker, which will allow her to ready... Well, she'll use YX Bolter, presumably to purge Skippy Time Hog, and then she'll be able to use Squawker to ready it or to stun one of her opponent's creatures. Yes, okay. And now we've got a good target for Biomatrix backup as well. So I'm expecting Skippy Time Hog to go and be... Wait, no. Instead, she's choosing to stun Quixo the Adventurer. So rather than purging Skippy, she has stunned Quixo the Adventurer. Because Squawker either lets you ready a Mars creature or stun a non-Mars creature. Okay, I can see where she's going with that. Quixo's got really good draw power. Lets you fight, and of course it could take out YX Bolter. So I see where she's going here. She can now potentially use her Quixo to take out her opponent's Quixo. Not this turn, but soon. Shaffles comes down. Oh, double Shaffles! That's nice. Takes Rachel from 4 Ember down to 2. She wasn't forging anyway, but now she's really not forging. She's not forging twice as hard as she was before. So she does get to play a Relentless Whispers down here. And she uses it to get rid of a Shaffles, which steals an Ember. So that was quite a nice play. And she also gets down a Poison Wave to take down the other Shaffles. So she does get both the Shaffles out, which is nice. And then she gets Dusk Runner onto Silvertooth. She's going to reap, gain an ember, and steal an ember. And now Rachel's back to doing what Rachel's deck does. She's just gaining ember. Simple as that. She's on 7 ember. She's forging a key next turn. And the thing is, the Dimension Door would be great here, but it's not in George's hand. Because then he could reap twice. Oh, no, he couldn't even because of Quicksow. Yeah, this is difficult, ladies and gentlemen. And both his Shaffles are gone. Now, Mermook comes down, which will increase the cost of forging a key by 1. But that doesn't mean Rachel can't forge. It just means that she's not going to be able to forge for 6. She's got to forge for 7. But she's still forging. Ooh, now unfortunately for George, he gets Nepenthe Seed down. But there's no library access. Oh, look. Rachel gets a Nexus down. The thing is, if you look at George's board, Assault Bear can take out Nexus. Mermook can take out Nexus. Hunting Witch can at least break the elusive. So George really is going to have to go Untamed next turn to take out Nexus, unless he's got some kind of cheeky damage card. But even like Twin Bolt, I suppose he could use a combination of Twin Bolt Emission and Dexter here. But he needs to get that Nexus off the board. Because otherwise, I feel extremely confident in saying Rachel's going Shadows next turn, and she's going to use Nexus to get rid of that Nepenthe Seed. So here goes Mermook. Yeah, that Nexus is gone. You have to. You have to. Mermook goes and breaks the elusive. Ancient Bear takes it down. And that's the kind of interplay we've got here. George is desperate for Nepenthe Seed. So Rachel wants to use Nexus to make sure that George can't use Nepenthe Seed, which means that George needs to have a board such that he can make sure that Rachel doesn't get the Nexus to get rid of the Nepenthe Seed. And round we go. Now the good news for Rachel is she's already forged a key. And the other great news for Rachel is she's got a Time Traveller, and she's played another Time Traveller. She's drawn 4 cards. She's got 2 Ember. She's got a Twin Bolt Emission she can play. And she's got a Fogify she can play. So even with Mermook and a Help from Future South that she can play, now it won't allow her to get... I love this play. She's using her Twin Bolt Emission to get rid of her own Time Traveller so that she can play the Help from Future South in her hand to get her Time Traveller back and then play it to get another Ember and another 2 cards. So half of her Twin Bolt Emission got her an Ember and drew 2 cards. That, ladies and gentlemen, was a wonderful, wonderful play. And that's why it's great when you see cards like Twin Bolt Emission that don't necessarily have to target your own characters, your own creatures. Oh, that was fun, ladies and gentlemen. That was fun. All right. So, over to George now. And Rachel's got 10 Ember. So, George is... And this is looking a bit like game 1 now. Because now Rachel's got 9 Ember. And she's forging next turn. And... Well, see, I'm looking at her hand. We got to... Oh, actually... Bait and Switch, Relentless Whispers, Noddy the Thief. We could be looking at a good Shadows turn next turn. So this is one of those weird situations where Rachel was kind of hoping that George would stop at like 20 Ember so Rachel could bait and switch a bunch. I mean, bait and switch would still gain her an Ember. It would put them both at 4. I'm not sure that's the best use ever for bait and switch, if I'm honest. I don't think that's the number 1 use for bait and switch. So that's kind of awkward. Now, she is going Mars, you can see here. She's got a bunch of good Mars cards. She's playing a Squawker. Now, first she plays White Auxiliary Bolter and then uses Squawker right away. You know, she's going to try and purge a creature. Now, Mushroom Man, remember, is actually an 11 cost, even though it looks like a 2 cost. She could purge Dust Pixie, or she could purge Dust Imp. Now, she does deal 2 damage to a Dust Pixie. And she is using Psychic Network to steal a couple of Ember. So she doesn't even need bait and switch. She's up to 8 Ember. And as it stands at the moment, this is not looking great for George. Rachel's passed on 8 Ember. George has got 3. Now his Dimension Door would be good here. Incidentally, we see why Exilic Bolter and Dust Pixie have been purged. There's no Dimension Door, which is George's great way of stealing. And he's lost both his Shaffles, which are his great way of making Rachel lose Ember. And as it stands at the moment, it looks like George has lost. Because he's not got library access, so he's not able to start the combo. And there's basically 2 ways of stopping Rachel forging and not on the board at the moment. Now, he does play a Dexter to capture 1 Ember, which is fine. But I don't know what the plan is here. Because as it stands at the moment, Rachel's forging a key at the beginning of next turn. And it doesn't really matter. Now, there is no Mermook on the board for George here, so it is a 6 forging rather than a 7. So Rachel is not going to need all that much more. Now, he does get Wild Wormhole back and plays it. And he actually plays library access. But unfortunately, ladies and gentlemen, there's nothing he can do. Rachel forges her first key, and Game 4 looks an awful lot like Game 1. George cannot get the combo going fast enough, and that's it. Simple as that. George did not get the combo going off as fast as he wanted to, and Rachel's deck is good at Ember generation. We've seen that. There's a lot of draw, there's a lot of Ember. That's what makes Rachel's deck good. There's no great combo in Rachel's deck. I mean, look, she's got double Time Traveler, right? We all know double Time Traveler's great. But the fact of the matter is, what Rachel's deck does is it draws cards and it gains Ember. And as much as a Nexus is a lovely silver bullet here, and it is, it's not really come into play very much in this series. So, off to Game 5, I suppose. Now, I know I've said this before, ladies and gentlemen, but this is the actual final. I know we started as a best of 3 and had a final, but now we've gone to a best of 5, and now this is the final. Of course, it's going to be really interesting if Rachel wins here, because in a tournament, it would be a best of 3 and George would already have won. So if Rachel wins this game, do we go, yay, Rachel won the best of 5, she's the champion? Or do we go, well, Rachel won the best of 5, but tournaments are played best of 3, so George is the real champion? That, ladies and gentlemen, is going to be the controversial one. Hey-ho. So George does start with a Nepenthe Seed in his hand. Does he want to play it this early? I'm not sure. Now, Rachel saying there, it's kind of glad it's come to this rather than being smashed every game. I agree. This has been a good series, and bearing in mind with George's deck, we could have just seen 3 games in a row of George getting the combo off. Here's what's interesting to me, though. George only got the combo off in Game 3. George so far has only done the combo when it really mattered. Just something to bear in mind. So George got his Shaffles down, but Rachel straight away got rid of it with a Twin Bolt Mission before playing a Quixo the Adventurer down, which, I mean, I like it. It's got Skirmish, lets you draw a card when you survive a fight, which you will because you've got Skirmish. George then goes Skippy Time Hog, followed by a Phase Shift into Nepenthe Seed. Oh, and he's actually then able to play out his entire hand. Because he plays Sloppy Lab Work, it gets him an Ember, but it doesn't do anything else because there is nothing to archive and nothing to discard. And then he gets a whole new hand, and he gets a Dimension Door, and he gets a Twin Bolt Mission, but he doesn't get library access. He's got a decent... he's got an alright turn for Untamed. Now, Rachel does get Tunk down. I don't know why, it's one of my favourite cards to say. Tunk. Tunk. She gets Grabber Jammer down. And she is able to use Orbital Bombardment there to, well, basically, George has no creatures. Now, speaking of that turn I mentioned, he gets a Hunting Witch down, drops a Ritual of Balance, drops a Mermook, which gets him an Ember while also increasing the cost of Rachel's keys by 1. Remember, you need to look at the wording here. So something like Titan Mechanic affects both players, whereas Mermook specifically refers to your opponent. So if it says your opponent, it's only them, whereas if it says keys cost -1 to forge, that is both player. So she plays her Psychic Network here, steal 1 Ember for each ready friendly Mars creature. Not bad, gets all George's Ember. And then she's able to drop a Grabber Jammer here, lets it fight Mermook. And it's gone. Oh, and she gets Biometrics back up onto it. So, of course, Grabber Jammer is great. You capture an Ember when you fight or when you reap, while increasing the cost of your opponent forging a key. Grabber Jammer is really, really good here. Grabber Jammer is a great, great card. Oh, Hand of Disc comes down and gets rid of Tunk. And Tunk's a 6-power creature with 1 armor that fully heals when you play another Mars creature. Tunk stays around, ladies and gentlemen. Tunk does not go very far. So down comes a Restring Guntis here. Hunting Witch gets George an Ember. Rachel, incidentally, has got enough to forge. Now Mermook's off the field. Question is, what's he going to do? What house are he going to lock Rachel out of? You've got to imagine it's going to be Shadows. And incidentally, there's a Nexus. Now, as it stands at the moment, essentially George needs 2 creatures of the same house, or a Logos creature with Twin Bolt Emission to be able to take out Nexus. So, as it stands at the moment, George does not have the board to take out Nexus. And yeah, Shadows was definitely the right decision there. Oh, and he's actually then double-dipped by using a Control the Weak to force Rachel to use Mars. Under the old ruling, he could have forced Rachel to use Shadows and Rachel would have had no active house next turn. Under the new rules, must overtakes cannot, and Rachel is forced to go Mars. So down comes a YX Zelo Bolter. Incidentally, great rule change, because that would literally have ruined the game. Although, incidentally, right, George has a library access and a Pemp Seed combo, whereas he would have had to Control the Weak Restring Guntis combo if that hadn't been gotten rid of. Oh, I enjoy that. Bad news, Rachel didn't get to do much on her turn. Good news, she still got to forge a key. So she's still up by 1 key to 0. So she's made a decent start here. She's doing all right. So Twin Bolt Emission does come down. And Dimension Door comes down. Not that that's really going to do anything because... Or is that just discarded? No, he did play it. But he's not going to gain any Ember from Reaping, so it really doesn't matter. Yeah, alrighty then. So, where are we to? Back to Rachel's turn. She's got no Ember. George has got 3. Oh! Not the biggest bait and switch ever, but not bad. And she gets the Sting down, and she gets Nexus down. Again, look at George's board. He does not have 2 creatures of the same house that can fight. And when someone's got elusive, that's what you need. Now, he's played his Twin Bolt Emission, but even if he hadn't, because it's a free power, he would need to... Well, no, that wouldn't even really work, because Twin Bolt Emission would be 2, but then 1 Logos creature still wouldn't actually do enough. So, frankly, and bearing in mind, even if you've got 2 creatures of the same house, you've still got to make sure one of them's a free power. Nexus ain't leaving this turn, ladies and gentlemen. Nexus ain't leaving this turn. So there really isn't very much for George to do here. Not in terms of getting rid of the Nexus. And I think it was still fairly early in the game, but I'm liking Rachel's position here a lot more than I'm liking George's. Now, the good news is he is getting down 3 untamed creatures. He is now building essentially an anti-Nexus board, because if Rachel were to drop Nexus next turn, he would be able to just get rid of them using all his untamed creatures. But the problem here is it's not next turn, it's this turn. So you've got, and of course George has used Control the Weak. So that's not an option anymore. Oh, George says literally didn't see the Nexus. Here's the issue. I don't think there's much he could have done. I really don't think there's much he could have done at all there. Because, yeah, I know he says he didn't see the Nexus, but I don't know what he would have done to get rid of the Nexus. We're running through the opportunities here. He didn't have 2 creatures of the same house to take it out anyway. He couldn't have used Hand of Dis because it's not on a flank and he'd used it anyway. George has got plenty of creature removal, but really, the only way George could stop her was playing a Control the Weak or Restoring Guntus, neither of which were in his hand. So, he missed the Nexus and that's sad, but I still don't think there's any way he could have stopped. I still think Rachel would have had the Nexus ready to go. So I think it's kind of irrelevant. It's sad that he didn't see it, but Nexus came down after Nepenthe was already on the board, and I don't know what option George would have had. Like I say, you need 2 creatures of the same house, one of which is a free power, in order to take out a Nexus. Or you need 1 creature of the same house and maybe a Dominator Bauble already on the field, which it wasn't. Or the ability to do free cheeky damage, which he couldn't. He's only got Twin Bolt Remission and he'd used it anyway. So Rachel's going now. I feel extremely confident that Rachel is going to pick Shadows. Oh. Oh, because the Pepsi's already gone. My apologies, ladies and gentlemen. I didn't see she'd already gotten rid of the Nepenthe. While I was chatting it through, Rachel had already gotten rid of it. I'd missed that turn. My apologies. So with Nepenthe gone, yes, Logo's made a lot more sense. So now she's got the double Time Traveller down. She's drawn a bunch of cards. She's got a bunch of Ember. And oh, look, she's back to 6 Ember. She has checked. And yeah, George is confirming that he didn't have an out to it anyway. Of course, we spent so long talking about the fact he didn't have an out, we missed that she'd already gone rid of it. So, here's the issue. Now, he does get to use Ritual of Balance here, which steals an Ember, which is nice. And it's actually crucial because it stops Rachel forging next turn. So that's actually huge. I'm not saying Rachel's using the phrase cheeky damage because I say that. But I am saying most people don't say cheeky damage. I want that to be the accepted phrase, incidentally. I want cheeky damage to be the phrase that everyone uses for direct or non-attack damage. Just a better phrase. Now, we do see Taliga coming down here, which is nice, but unfortunately, Rachel's already got quite a board of creatures out. There's still plenty more to play, I suppose. Actually, to be fair, she's got 3 Shadows creatures ready to go next turn. She's got an Urchin, a Silvertooth, and a Nexus. And really what George wants to do here is just... I mean, he needs to get rid of the Nexus and cycle his deck. So that... Or even, to be honest, just Big Twig and stun it would be fine. Because he needs to cycle his deck to get the Nepenthe back. And that's really difficult. Now, the good news is he's got a whole bunch of Ember... And he knows as well as we do that Rachel's already played her bait and switch. And she's got a deck of 13 cards. Bait and switch ain't coming down this turn. It's just not. So George can be quite confident in that. George knows that he's got a turn where Rachel can't bait and switch him. And that's going to be quite handy. Now, to be fair, Rachel does still have Effervescent Principle, which hasn't been played yet. Which could take George down to 6 Ember and her down to 3. As it stands, she's not able to do that, though, because she doesn't have it in hand. So she's gone Shadows. She gets her second Nexus down. Now, she needs to be careful for if Hand of Dis comes down. No, she doesn't, sorry. She wants to keep it on a flank in case Hand of Dis comes down. Because Hand of Dis would be huge. Just take out the Nexus. So having double Nexus there is really, really good. And... I mean, Rachel's just got a lot of creatures out. She's just sat there and just reaping to get to 10 Ember. And the thing is, she's forged a key and George hasn't. So if we go into a pure Ember race here, Rachel's winning the game. George is on 8, Rachel's on 10. And now she's drawing a new hand of 5 cards, including the Effervescent Principle. And I think Rachel's going to win this game. She was finally, I've been talking about it all game, she's finally able to use Nexus to take out the Nepenthe Seed. And honestly, that might have won her the game. She dropped it at the absolute perfect time. And George has forged a key, but is anyone looking at Rachel's Ember count? She's got 17 Ember. And remember, George doesn't play any emergency stop reaping cards. No Doorstep to Heaven, no Effervescent Principle, no Too Much to Protect, no Bait and Switch. I did a video about them. I'll try and remember to pop a link in the description, but if not, go check it out. It's called The Best Cards to Stop For. No, I haven't uploaded that yet. I'm going to upload it soon, ladies and gentlemen. I'm going to upload it soon. Point is, he doesn't play any of them. Best he's got is Dimension Door, and he's already played it. So that ain't coming down. And then he can maybe reap a few times. But even then, Rachel needs 12 Ember to forge her next 2 keys. She's got 17. George can steal 5 Ember and Rachel still wins the game next turn. This is not ideal. Yeah. Not ideal at all. Now, the good news is, Guardian Demon there is coming down, doing a bit of damage. Get rid of Urchin. Nice, I suppose. But we're at the stage of the game where an Urchin, you know, we're getting to that stage of the game where either George stops Rachel winning the game or Rachel wins the game. Simple as that. So Rachel goes Shadows. Now, remember, she's not able to forge this turn because of the Sting. George forged last turn, and the Ember went to Rachel because she had the Sting. She's now got to go Shadows so that she can sacrifice the Sting. And that's one of the important things about the Sting. You can get it down, you get all the Ember when your opponent forges a key, but you have got to be prepared to go Shadows the following turn. Now, we do see Nexus here using Dominator Bauble and Library of Babel. Just because. Rachel's now at 19 Ember, and alright, she's not forging this turn because of the Sting, but neither's George. And remember, the combo revolves around the Nepenthe Seed, and here's what George needs to get the combo out. He needs to get the Nepenthe Seed, but he needs to draw the rest of his deck because it's in the discard. So he needs to draw the other 5 cards in his deck, and then be able to draw some more, and one of them needs to be Nepenthe Seed, and he needs to be on an Untamed turn. He needs to play it down exhausted, he needs to wait a turn after having gotten rid of both of the Nexus, otherwise it won't matter. And then he can go Library Access Nepenthe Seed. If he's got Library Access in turn. In hand. And there's a decent chance he doesn't. It's not looking good for George here. George, I mean, we've seen this in game after game. We saw it in the final from Adepticon. And we've seen it in game 3 here. When George's deck fires, George's deck fires. But the fact of the matter is, when it doesn't fire like that, we end up with games like this. Now, the good news is, George has actually been doing pretty well. He's got Hunting Witch down. And he's actually been stealing quite nicely. So he played a Shula to steal an Ember. He's up to 12 Ember and he's put Rachel down to 12. Which seems really nice, except Rachel forges a key. And then she's down to 12, 13 now. And look, at this stage of the game, George ain't getting the combo off. It's too late for that. The combo's not going off. Maybe if this game can last another 3 or 4 turns, but it's clearly not going to. So the fact of the matter here is, George needs to stop Rachel forging. And George's deck is not built for that. He's got Dimension Door. He's got double Shaffles. But Dimension Door is great if you're going to reap a bunch. And Shaffles is great at whittling down turn after turn. Now, as it happens, he's got 4 untamed creatures out. Even if he stole 4 Ember off Rachel, she'd still have 9 Ember. I don't see how George wins this game. I think at this stage it's extremely unlikely that George wins this game. He's got a lovely board setup, he's got 2 keys forged, and he's got 9-10 Ember. But he's staring down an opponent now. Even something like Control the Weak or Restoring Guntus won't matter here, because it doesn't matter who Rachel chooses as her active house. She's not going to choose an active house. To be fair, even Effervescent Principle wouldn't save George here. Yeah, and there we go, ladies and gentlemen. Rachel forges her first key, and after all of that, we went to a best of 5, and Rachel ended up winning. Now, incidentally, the 2 games George won, there was one game where he got the combo off, and then there was that one game where he dropped the Restoring Guntus. So the interesting thing here is, how do we feel about that? Do we think Rachel's deck is better and George had the one win with Restoring Guntus, which was beautifully played, and then the one combo win, but generally Rachel's deck is better? Or do we think that, in a best of 3, Rachel still didn't pull out the win, and that actually she wasn't able to stop the combo in the game where it counted? I think the thing we've learned most here, and forgive me because we kind of knew this before we started, these are phenomenal decks. And that's the thing we shouldn't take away here. These are 2 Vault Tour winning decks. So we're not looking at these going, Rachel's deck just ran over George's, or George had an unstoppable. No. We're seeing here going, these are 2 phenomenal decks that would beat the vast majority of decks. So Rachel said, glad it went to 5 games. Yeah. And there we go, ladies and gentlemen. Those were fun games. Those were interesting, back and forth. There was a lot going on in those games. We saw a lot of different finishes. We saw Rachel rushing to win. We saw a combo win. We saw that crazy Restoring Guntus game. We saw Nexus being played on the perfect turn where George could not get rid of it, which ended up just losing him the combo. We saw Rachel getting rid of her own Time Traveler just to grab it straight back from the discard and play it down. But the fact of the matter is, the conclusion here is that George has a great combo deck. But outside the combo, it's a good deck. Rachel has a phenomenal deck in terms of speed, drawing cards, Ember acceleration, etc. But she doesn't have that crazy combo like George has. Which I think is how this ended up quite so well. So there we go, ladies and gentlemen. In a best of 3, we saw George winning. In a best of 5, we saw Rachel winning. These are 2 phenomenal decks, and I'm going to leave it up to you to decide which one you believe is the true winner. But I want you to tell me about it in the comment section. Go nuts, but do please remember the rule. Be nice, would you? A huge thank you to Rachel and George for putting this together. First of all, for letting me commentate this, and secondly, for thinking about me. They hit me up and they were like, hey Ross, do you fancy casting this? And I went, yes, that sounds amazing. Those guys are awesome and I'm very grateful. And now, ladies and gentlemen, please make sure you like this video, subscribe to this channel, and follow me on Twitter at the Wossy, where we talk about Keyforge and a whole bunch of other games. But by far the most important thing, as always, look after yourselves until next time. Thank you very much for watching. My name's Ross and you've been watching Wossy Plays.